As I drove down the dark and winding road on the outskirts of my old hometown, I worried that in the last few miles of my trip, the rhythmic hum of my tires against the pavement might finally lull me to sleep. I was on my way back home for the holidays, and the clock on my dashboard read 10:43 p.m. I had grown tired of listening to the radio an hour before, but I turned it on again, allowing it to play softly in the background, hoping it would be enough to get me home. There was an eerie stillness in the night around me, but I didn't mind after the month I'd had. The breakup with James had left me on edge, especially considering his unstable behavior, but I was far removed from that now. At least for the next few days. Except that, as I glanced in my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of headlights in the distance behind me. Another car, oddly maintaining its distance. We remained like that for a few minutes, the other car never getting any closer, never turning onto some other road. I tried to push the thought of James out of my mind, reminding myself that he couldn't possibly have followed me for the last 4 hours. I brushed off the unease, convincing myself that everything was all right, but every time I changed lanes, the other car did too. Every time I sped up or slowed down, it matched my pace. Panic began to creep in, gripping my chest like a vice. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. The radio continued to play as I made it into town, but I could no longer hear it over the sound of my own voice in my head. My rational mind wrestled with my irrational fears. It couldn't be James, I thought. Not after all this time and distance. My heart pounded in my ears as I replayed the events of the past few weeks in my mind. The arguments, the fights, the anger. There was no way he could be following me now. I made a left turn, fully aware that this wasn't the way to my parents' house. The other driver followed. Then I made a right. They followed. That's when I realized how close I was to the local police station. I took a deep breath and turned onto the road that would lead me there. A sense of relief washed over me. The presence of authority should put an end to this paranoia. I pulled into the parking lot and looked in my rearview mirror. Seconds later, the other vehicle slowed down as it was passing by the entrance. It was an old green pickup truck. The inside of the truck was much too dark to see the driver's face, but I could see that he turned his head to look at me before driving away. He had long hair and was wearing what looked like a baseball cap. I took a few minutes to collect myself before pulling back onto the road, driving in the opposite direction of the truck. My hands were still trembling, but I felt a glimmer of hope that the worst was behind me. I drove cautiously, my eyes darting between the road and my mirrors. The quiet darkness was broken only by the occasional flicker of streetlights, and a few houses with Christmas lights. The road stretched on, and as I neared my parents' neighborhood, the tension began to ease. I pulled into their driveway, my heart rate finally returning to normal. As I walked through the front door, the warmth of home enveloped me, and I eagerly recounted the night's events to my concerned parents. The next day, we were gathered in the kitchen preparing Christmas dinner together. The TV in the background played the local news, the anchor's voice a dull murmur against the clatter of pots and pans. And then, as if in a surreal twist of fate, the news caught my attention. The news anchor was reporting on an incident not 15 minutes from my parents' house. A couple had been found brutally murdered in their home. Witnesses had reported hearing screams, and they had seen the suspect fleeing the scene in a green pickup truck. My heart stopped as my eyes locked onto the TV screen. They were showing a police sketch of the suspect, a man with long hair and a baseball cap, the same man I had seen driving behind me just hours before. The room seemed to spin, and my parents turned to me, their eyes filled with concern. My voice trembled as I explained what had happened, the pieces falling into place in a horrifying realization. The man who had followed me was likely the same person responsible for this gruesome crime. As the news continued to unravel, I could hardly process the chilling truth. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a mix of fear and gratitude. Fear for what might have happened had I not pulled into the police station, and gratitude for the inexplicable intuition that had guided me to safety. The image of the police sketch stayed etched in my mind. a haunting reminder that darkness can lurk just beyond the shadows of our everyday lives.